Hey everyone, on this week's Trade to Black podcast, we look back at 2021 and how it was the biggest year ever for IPOs. Here in 2022, same thing is still happening, even though the current market conditions. So, what does this mean both short term and long term? Plus, we look at the cannabis industry and how the Dems are making one last major push between now and the midterms for legislation to bring cannabis across the line, including safe banking. What's our predictions? Find out now in our latest podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Trade to Black podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Shadd Dales, and before we get into this week's podcast, as usual, all views on the Trade to Black podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or our guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Joining me as usual, lead financial writer from the TDR, Benjamin A. Smith. Benjamin, great to have you back on. How was the week?
Week was great. We had quite the finish to the week with the CPI number. I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more, but lots of market volatility. As the old Chinese proverb says, may you live in interesting times.
Yeah, to say the least. Want to welcome back. He was last here in December. He is the president of the CSE, the Canadian Securities Exchange, Richard Carleton. Richard, looks like it's some nice weather where you're hanging out. How are you?
Chad, it's a lovely day here in downtown Toronto. I'm at the new King Street West headquarters of the Canadian Securities Exchange, otherwise known as my place, this afternoon.
Yeah. Where'd you guys? Did you guys move?
No, we haven't moved. We're still high above downtown Toronto on the 72nd floor, First Canadian Place.
How's the downtown core? Is it getting busy? You seeing like early COVID levels with people, or is it still not the same?
It's building, but it's got a long way to go. The funny thing is that for as easy it is to not wait in line for an elevator and so on, still if you've got a favorite lunch spot down in the food court or wanting to go one of the regular lunch places, packed. But so I don't know where those people are coming from or what offices they're working in, but not on the 58 to 72 elevator bank in the First Canadian Place.
That's interesting. You wonder if it ever gets back to the way it was before. I don't know. I don't see it just because of the way people are working and getting things done. But we were in the city for like the last 4 or 5 days. My God, traffic. Brutal getting around that city. I want to first begin looking back. 2021 was the largest year ever for IPOs. And we fast forward now to this year. Where are we at here in 2022? Like, are you seeing any effect on your listing pipeline in terms of new companies holding off, knowing the current market conditions that we're currently in?
Yeah, Shad, it's very much, as you would expect, sector specific. So as of the end of March, we've actually listed 50 companies so far in 2022, which people find a little surprising. But of course, the vast majority of those companies are miners, right? And what isn't mining is ag tech or some kind of story that's related to shortening a supply chain. So, we knew coming out of COVID that shorten the supply chain trade was going to be an interesting one, as well as, of course, the electrification of the economy, which has been an overarching thesis for a couple to 4 years, I guess, at this point. But the shooting war, of course, in Ukraine is and the sanctions against Russia, which have taken Russia off the field in particular for the production of base metals, and we'll leave, of course, the oil and gas industry aside for a second. But the critical thing here is the supply of nickel, copper, zinc, and a variety of other materials that are used in both in heavy industry as well as, of course, electric vehicles.
For sure.
And we have seen primarily, and I'll be blunt, as a result of Chinese manipulation of the prices of those base metals over the last 25, 30 years. A lot of projects which were drilled in Canada, in the United States, in Latin America, in South America, which are quite clearly commercial grade at historic prices. But because, say, for example, the price of copper has been depressed for so long, the price of nickel has been depressed for so long, there just hasn't been any progress on those particular projects.
Do you see that changing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it was almost literally like a switch being thrown. So as soon as the effect of the sanctions began to take place, we saw the impact on the price, obviously spectacularly, of nickel. But the copper price, of course, has been rising steadily, as have the other base metals. We have seen a tremendous number of new companies that are looking to advance projects, not just in the traditional gold and silver exploration side, but a much broader portfolio of metals. And one thing I will say too is that a lot of these projects are looking at, as I mentioned, properties that were explored to a significant extent 40, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like we know there's a commercial grade deposit there. And I think the difference is, and this is obviously something where people really have to do their homework, in terms of the different opportunities that they might look at. But these projects are far more likely to have a producing mine in a 5-year or 7-year time horizon than the 15 to 20 years that you sometimes see on the precious metals side.
Yeah.
So these are going to be different kinds of investments, as I say, from what you see in the traditional Canadian junior gold exploration play, for example.
PDAC, does that start tomorrow or is it Sunday?
PDAC actually has already started, as far as I can tell. The number of Australian miners who've been showing up on our doorstep, and the number of social events that have already taken place. But I believe officially it starts on Sunday.
So what are you like? Look, we were in Miami, 2 months ago, and that was the first time we were at a Benzinga event since pre-COVID, and wow, what a turnout it was. But are you anticipating the same thing? Like, what's the sentiment coming in to this week? Are there a lot of people? Because really, this conference, if I'm correct, hasn't taken place since pre-COVID. But are you expecting the same thing, a big turnout, knowing people haven't been seen each other like in 2 years, but most importantly, too, just everything that you've kind of mentioned and outlined, just the overall excitement pertaining to the industry itself?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of currents. The first one is exactly that, excitement. Projects are being financed. Mergers and acquisitions are being done by the majors. The majors are starting to do an awful lot of work looking at some of the junior exploration plays who've managed to move their project along beyond the strict greenfield state. At the same time, of course, it's a little awkward from the timing perspective, because if you're a junior miner in the Northern Hemisphere, this is when you're normally out in the field, or you're beginning to get out in the field. Right? That's why PDAC is in March, because before spring breakup, they had an opportunity to come to the big city and do some deals and raise some money and talk up, what they were doing. And of course, as soon as they went back, again, the spring was just around the corner, and you'd be out in the field doing your samples, running your diamond drill camps, and so on. So there's been a little grumbling from the industry that it's awkward, especially for the junior explorers. But by the same token, as you say, as hot as the market is, and with the number of deals that are getting financed, people will, I think, be making the effort to come into the city. The other thing, Shadd and Ben, that I'd say too is that we had a preliminary event on Wednesday evening in Toronto, and Ben,
I told you we had to go to that party. We missed it. I thought I was overstaying my welcome, though, with all the events I was going to before, Richard, right? And for those that don't know, I follow you around a lot.
Yeah, no, I do in fact have a restraining order against Shadd. It's well known. But but as I say, like Benzinga in Miami, the volume level in the room was about 15 to 20% higher than normal. And how I characterize all of these things, it's like the first day back at school.
Nice.
You haven't seen these people for a while.
Bingo.
Who's grown, who's done this, who's done
gained
that.
15 pounds since COVID, all that stuff, right?
The energy in the room is just phenomenal. So, and we certainly had that on Wednesday night. So
that's great. Ben, you want to add?
Now, Richard,
go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. I want to add, like you're mentioning the sea change and some of the enthusiasm you've seen out there in the mining sector. we saw that same enthusiasm in, the 2017, 2018 with all the cannabis listings and all the ancillary company cannabis listings. And you sort of affably were called the Cannabis Securities Exchange up here with Canadian investors, right? You had so many listings in proportion to, your whole exchange listings portfolio. So do you see that changing somewhat, where you're becoming a little bit more mining centric since the cannabis enthusiasm has sort of died down a little bit, and now you're getting more into like the mining companies and you're focusing more on that area?
Well, in point of fact, Ben, the mining sector has always been really at the heart of the Canadian Securities Exchange all along. It's just that it didn't attract all the headlines when the cannabis sector
Yeah.
was listing, and of course the asset valuations were going through the roof. But we always had, with the exception of the time around the global financial crisis when commodity prices plunged, and then in the follow-on from that. But really, since 2016, 2017, I want to say, the miners have been a steady contributor to the new listings portfolio at the Canadian Securities Exchange. So, we've always spent a lot of time focused on the mining industry. So we've always been active with PDAC and VREC, the Vancouver Resource International or Investment Conference, rather, and a number of other industry associations and gatherings. And this is it's kind of a case that maybe the tide has gone out on a few of the other sectors, and people
Yeah.
say, "Hey, great, you look at all the miners you've got." Well, we actually have a lot of miners. They are, in fact, the largest cohort or sector on the exchange by actually quite a large number.
How do you see the next 12 months of this industry developing? Because I was actually surprised to learn there's a lot of younger investors that are now getting involved in this space for different reasons, just because they want difference. And I speak to a lot of the executives within this industry that talk about climate being a major concern. And that's not putting it mildly. That is a major concern, obviously, for younger investors. But when you look at electric vehicles and the emergence of it all and where we're going with this, this industry has notoriously been known as an industry that obviously moves slow. But if we're getting younger investors in and they're watching this podcast right now, what are good reasons outside of what you've also outlined before as to why it makes sense to enter in this space? And again, how you see it basically developing over the next 12 months?
Yeah, that's a great question because you're right. We saw a whole new generation of investors, in fact, open their first brokerage accounts over the last couple of years. And whether it was with the Wealth Simples or the Quest Trades, and of course, people now get mad at me for not having mentioned their brokerage firm, but obviously the discount brokerage
there goes our
sector
sponsorship
in Canada,
opportunities.
no, exactly. But they opened a record number of new accounts, and by and large, those investors were the 20 to 35-year-old group who were opening their first accounts. And you're absolutely right. A key part of investor engagement from in fact, really any company that in this market that's looking to connect with that investor audience, they got to have whether it's their ESG story straight or their how are we making the world a better place by being a successful company story. You're right. It's people are interested in impact investing and wanting to feel good about where they put their money. And so, and I think it's also true when you look at the policies in Canada in terms of at the provincial and the federal level in getting approval to move your projects forward. For example, the whole social license concept, so that you have to have your story straight with the local First Nations if you're in either a treaty or a non-treaty land. And as I say, that's one of the first questions that a younger investor is going to ask. If you guys got this squared away, is the local First Nations community on side? Are they going to benefit from this as the approach to extracting these minerals sustainable? What are you doing to minimize environmental impact and to abate any impacts that take place? So, as I say, it really does. It's front of mind for these investors. And as we know, it's primarily retail investors that support this space, like always.
Yeah.
And if the boomers are all my cohort are heading off into the sunset, as I say, it's absolutely incumbent on company management to have that story straight so they can and will engage with this new generation of investor.
I think management has to get better too at communication for sure, because in a lot of ways the industry has kind of been reborn. But most importantly too, as you said, with new investors, there's new questions and new concerns that they have. And do you feel like they're getting the right messaging through, or do you think that there's still a lot of I don't want to say room for improvement, but do you think you'll start to see more and more change as a lot of these, mining companies look to content platforms, for example, like ours, or social media like Reddits of the world? Do you see companies like that getting more well-versed when it comes to communications within the industry and the conversations that you've had?
It's starting. And I think people are cognizant of the fact that this is part of the program, because, as I say, it's if you're going to move your project beyond the exploration stage,
Right.
you need all of these permits and approvals.
Yeah.
And you'd better not have the local First Nations chaining themselves to the drill rig in protest over your lack of engagement with them.
Yeah.
So, as I say, I think they all kind of go hand in glove. So you have to, not only tell the story or whatever, you got to walk the walk.
Yeah. 100%.
And if those two are together, and as I say, increasingly that is the case, you'll see the management teams that get it be rewarded with funding and a lower cost of capital.
Mm-hmm.
Are you starting to see a lot more younger investors starting to get interested in the mining space, Richard? I know, a lot of the young people tend to want like fast money plays and all that, and mining isn't quite that. Obviously, it's more long cycle, it's very cyclical. But are you starting to see like a younger generation start to want to know about assay results and about how these mining process works and diamond drills and just overall getting involved in the space more and more?
Well, I think that is happening. And I kind of think of it as it's kind of like the trading world itself, right? So in my career, I basically had a hiatus from about 2000 to about 2007 when I was off doing other things, as opposed to sort of being in the front lines of the equity trading world. And when I came back, I kind of looked around and I said to somebody, when did we let children trade?
Yeah.
Because there had been a significant
as soon as we legalized gambling, right?
There'd been a significant generational shift. And I see that the beginnings of that at PDAC and some of the other industry events where the crowd, which, as I say, was certainly, how do I characterize this properly, experienced, are now skewing considerably younger.
Yes.
And, the other thing, too, is that this is going to be properly done a source of tremendous wealth for Canada, right? So not just from an investment perspective, but as an industry, there will be a lot of jobs.
You see big names and big brands obviously getting involved with this really like relatively soon. Like this, it's traditionally been mining, but now when you get rumors of Elon Musk getting involved, suddenly mining is cool. And when you get some of these big name people in with big brands, it puts the country on the map, right? Here we thought cannabis was going to put us on the map.
No, that's absolutely right. So, one of my old jobs used to be designing indices. And here's a fun fact. In about 1948, Inco was more than half of the Toronto Stock Exchange Composite Index market cap.
Wow.
It was more than half?
One stock.
I know.
So, oh my God. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
And, again, you think about the reasons that given that Europe had been flattened and now was rebuilding with steel, there was gigantic demand for nickel, and the Sudbury mining camp, which is the richest in the world and will continue to be for many, many, many years to come, was the principal supplier of nickel to the world. And
There's your headline clip of the podcast right there, right? I got to ask, when I look at it from a macro level, it's been a challenging, and it still is a very challenging year for everybody and from all facets. But how do you see this economy playing out from now to say? Do you think the midterm election come November will have any impact on maybe turning this economy around for the better?
Well, I don't know about turning around for the better. Um, you know, close to home and leading up to the midterms, I think the conventional wisdom, of course, is that the Democrats will be obliterated
Yeah.
and likely lose. They may lose control of both houses. So what that means in the short term, actually, is of interest to viewers to the Dale report. Is I think there's going to be one more significant push from the Democrats in the House and the Senate to pass some kind of liberalization package for the cannabis industry. And it will be not much. It may just be something on the banking side, but
safe, you think, or is that a stretch?
No. Like, they're going to try. They may fall a vote or two short in the Senate, but there's one more attempt coming before the House and the Senate adjourn for the midterms to try to get something through. And knowing full well that this is probably their last chance for maybe 4 years, 6 years.
Absolutely. What's that say for the industry then? Like, what's at stake here? If we fall one or two votes short, then what's this translate into long term?
So the interesting thing, Shadd, is that we have a number of companies which, against all odds and in really difficult business conditions, supply chains that are limited to the individual states that they operate in, having to use cash only, so on, and no deductibility of business expenses for federal corporate tax purposes. We have some winners. These companies are growing their top line, they're growing their bottom line. They figured it out. They can navigate in this regulatory environment.
Mm-hmm.
So the difficulty or the frustration for those management teams, and obviously I talk to them regularly, is why aren't we getting more love from the market? Because we're winning.
I know.
We are absolutely building really, really good businesses. So if they get a little help, and maybe it's in the form of tax reform and the ability to get access to the to the visa rail and maybe easier access to banking services, then they become almost overnight significantly more profitable than they are now.
Yeah.
But so I think that's the story to watch in the coming weeks and months. And as I say, whether we get there or not, there certainly will be, I think, a lot of news in that or on that front.
Ben, you want?
Yeah, I think you're right on the track, Richard. I mean, we saw today, this week, actually, last week, it was reported actually yesterday that Chuck Schumer talked to, I think it was Representative David Joyce in the House. And this was like the first conversation that we saw really about trying to setting himself up in case his CAOA Act that he's scheduled to introduce before the summer recess, if that doesn't pass. So this is sort of like the first indications that he's setting himself up for if his act is introduced and it fails like everybody expects it to, what is plan B?
Well,
so I think you're absolutely on track. I think they're going to try something. And let's not forget that, New York goes legal in November or December, right? So if Chuck Schumer comes up empty and he loses in the Senate and he's no longer the Senate majority leader, he's got to do something to protect the businesses coming online in New York, that at least have banking so social equity can go through and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm afraid social equity is probably, as a rider, is a non-starter federally.
100%. 100%.
So that's and again, if you speak to again offline folks in the industry, they regard Chuck's bill as a really, really, really good book that then has a horrifying ending. Because a 25% federal excise tax on cannabis would basically drive a significant percentage of the market back into the hands of the
Black market.
what do we call it? The legacy, the black market.
Wow.
It would completely price it out
Yep.
of out of anything approaching competitiveness with the black market. So as I say, Chuck's bill is not very well liked
Yeah.
by the industry operators for that reason. And as I say, there will be a lot of arm twisting in the coming weeks, but it's not clear that, as I say, that they get there.
Hmm. Is there any chance you see somebody like Mitch McConnell looking at this anything differently at all if the Republicans do
No.
indeed take control? So there's like zero chance. So it's
Yeah,
either
so-
A, last-ditched effort by the Democrats, or B, this is at a standstill for a while. Is that what you're saying?
So again, speaking out of school with just the two of us, and of course a vast worldwide audience, what I've heard is that Mitch, who did support the Farm Bill,
Yes.
which provided for the legal cultivation and harvesting of hemp and processing of hemp, when he discovered that in fact there were, psychoactive compounds, whether it's Delta 8 or other things that were extractable from hemp, he thinks his view is that he was hoodwinked into legalizing cannabis, and that he has literally no time whatsoever for the industry, its advocates, or anybody else. So
Wow. That's telling it like it is. And
the quick answer is no. And the other thing that people can't lose sight of is that the Biden administration itself is not supportive either. Mr. Biden is on record still as believing that cannabis is a gateway drug. And Kamala Harris, of course, when she was Attorney General for the great state of California, incarcerated more people, and in particular more people of color, for simple possession of cannabis products than any AG in the history of California. So,
Yeah. It's amazing how investors are
Yeah.
sort of hoodwinked, thinking, believing all the talk before the election and that they're going to do this and that, and then nothing
Well-
happened, right? And then just the bad luck for investors in general, because now, Mitch McConnell has a chance to become the Senate Majority Leader, and he probably will again. So it's like you had hopium on one side. One side wanted to do too much, and then now the other side wanted to do too little, and it looks like he may be coming back in power and controlling
but
the
again,
agenda.
I think what investors should be looking at is, again, this is not the story, right? The story is that we've got
fundamentals.
10 or so multi-state operators that are building a spectacular business.
I know.
And as you mentioned, more wealthy, populous states that are coming online. So after New York, there's potential for Pennsylvania, some of the other, industrialized states of northern U.S. So yeah, it's there are a lot of opportunities still for the good operators to expand the businesses beyond where they're at currently. So as I say, look at the fundamentals. Absolutely, as Shadd says.
Fundamentals and getting Snoop Dogg to run for president. I wonder if that can happen. Last thing I want to touch on briefly is we covered this psychedelic space quite a bit for the past 18 months. What we're learning now is obviously the companies that have a long runway of cash and diversification, like we've said since day one, are really going to obviously win this race, so to speak. Looking back at how this industry has performed over the past 6 months, are you surprised at all as to how many retail investors have kind of exited stage left and how a lot of these companies have run out of money so fast, even though a lot of data efficacy in the early stages looks to be very, very positive?
Yeah, I guess the quick answer is not really.
Yeah.
And of course, remember, there were a lot of different approaches brought to the table, to try to advance, again, the understanding or the commercialization of different aspects of the psychedelics industry. But fundamentally, I think as people should have appreciated out of the gate, is this is not like cannabis, a consumer packaged goods market, right? It's pharma.
Yes.
Right? It's a drug. And it's a drug that is to be, again, powerful historical clinical evidence to suggest, and anecdotal evidence to suggest that efficacy against a whole variety of anxiety, depression, catastrophic brain injury issues, and so on, that there's an addiction in particular, there's some, again, substantial therapeutic benefit. With the challenges that a lot of these compounds can't be patented because they've been used by people for 5,000 years or whatever, which of course complicates the traditional pharma model where the compound is patentable and then you move it through the trials and so on. But as I was telling anybody who would listen at the time, that I believe the average investment required to get a drug through phase 3 clinical trials in the United States and approved for prescription is somewhere between 12 and 17 billion US.
Wow.
And I didn't see anybody come to the CSE or the other exchanges in Canada with a war chest of 12 to 17 billion. Now, I'm being grossly unfair because, of course, that's not how the industry works. The industry works where you have, like the mining industry, junior companies which explore, and the big guys who are good at the clinical research trials, they're good at raising capital, and they're good at marketing compound or the new drugs to doctors and obviously to the public. They sit back. They don't spend the risky money. What they do is they sit back and see, okay, what's working,
right,
and why is it working?
You make a good point, though. Every single time you see world-renowned doctor on a press release, I want to roll my eyes. But I guess to really measure who is a world-renowned doctor and who is not comes down to those that obviously can raise obviously a lot of money. So,
but again, the proof is in what progress are you making in the preclinical stages, right? And what it is the thing that you are looking to address, the disease, the ailment. Is it something that, to be kind of capitalistic and gross about it, is something we can make money from? Now, fortunately, depression, yeah, absolutely. Anxiety, yep, absolutely. Addiction issues, for sure. But as I say, the business model is somewhat complicated by the fact that both, one, the compounds may not be patentable, and two, the course of treatment tends to be not, a Xanax in the morning and a Xanax before bed for the rest of your life. It's a course of treatment maybe over a number of weeks, supervised by a therapist, with maybe a reset every, 6 months, 6 to 12 months, right? It's a different, as I understand it, different course of treatment, different delivery pattern.
How are you seeing the pipeline, Richard? Is the pipeline slowing down from prospective psychedelic companies willing to list?
Yeah,
I'm sure it has.
I think that's absolutely fair. The other pipeline for which we know exists, but certainly did slow down because of the drop in asset valuations, are the currently private U.S. multi-state operators. There are a few of them. They know that sooner or later there will be a mergers and acquisitions frenzy, and to do that, if they're going to be successful, they need to be a public company. And we certainly are talking to a number of them, but as I say, they're waiting at this point to see a recovery in the valuations for these companies before taking the plunge.
This has been The Slice. Appreciate you checking in. Enjoy this nice warm weather here in Toronto, and let's keep in touch.
Will do. Pleasure as always, Shadd. Benjamin, great talking to you.
And I'm peeking around the corner. I'll be following you around all summer long. Likewise. Just to see what's going on and developing, okay?
It's all good.
Thanks, Richard.
All right. Thanks a lot, Richard. Maybe we'll see you at the PDAC.
Yes. I'm on my way, Richard. I'm on my way. You got to wear that TDR hat, though. That was a great picture you had down in Miami with us. That's actually, what'd you think of that event?
Which
Benzinga.
One? You mean like the entirety of Benzinga?
What'd you think? Fun?
Well, the fact that we found ourselves out with Rick Ross and Ric Flair and Mike Tyson on the night of the beat up a
Fresh
guy on
off
an
of
airplane.
beating up a guy on a plane, right? Oh man, that was good times though. I gotta admit, Benzinga was fun. Okay, I'll see you at
Yeah, no,
PDAC. We'll keep in touch. Okay.
all right.
All
Absolutely.
right, take care. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you like this video, wait until you see what we have next. Some of the best thought leaders in the verticals that we cover, from cannabis and psychedelics to cryptos and NFTs and sports wagering. So if you want to learn more, make sure to click on that bell for all notifications, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.